of relating it to my experience.
Apple is not it's not my favorite fruit, and I'd rather eat anything else. So I like the juicy part and everything, but I don't have much to say about because I prefer other fruits. So this is what came up for me.
So again, there's something in this that which is about noticing your experience of what you like and what you don't like. Yeah, and we can apply that to our clients as well. Even though we're trying to imagine that there's a degree of objectivity. I mean, I'm just using your example is really great. Is that actually what it begins to flush out are the subtleties of my likes and dislikes, conscious or unconscious.
I'm relating it to myself also. I'm going through a stressful period in my life, and the seeds sort of are a symbol of rebirth.
So again, you're interpreting it, yeah, to one's own experience, yeah. It already begins to influence, or the subject.
So when she was talking about the seeds, normally I would always think about rebirth, but lately I watched a movie and somebody was saying how apple seeds can be like cyanide and green. So even though she mentioned rebirth earlier on, because just recently that was my experiences, I kept thinking, okay, I'm enjoying this apple, but the seeds, if you collect enough of those seeds, it can be potent.
So brilliant. So what we have been doing here as you're talking about presenting your interpretations, your experiences, your stories, and so on, is you are expressing how it is for you to be in the world. Yeah? Apple seed denotes a number of different meanings. Yeah? In fact, the apple has denoted, as many meanings as there are people in this room. Yeah? Which tells us something, and this is where we're going to bring in a big word, yeah, but which is also important. And the word that we use here is our ontological knowing. You will notice this word. This word comes out in research. Yeah? And when we're looking at ontological knowing, what we're looking at is how individuals understand their world, yeah? Their being. How individuals understand and make sense of their world. Yeah? So it's a bit like how I am in the world, how I experience myself in the world. Yeah? And that becomes really important for us as researchers to understand people's lived experience. Does that make sense? What it is like for them. That's the ontological knowing. The way in which, if you like, I sit and I experience myself in the world, my beingness. And there are countless philosophers who really work with that knotty problem of how do people experience their world? Yeah. So there were Western philosophers. Have people heard of people like Heidegger? Yeah. Heidegger, there's a lot of European philosophers, but there are many Islamic scholars who would also talk about a way of being, that quality of beingness in the world. So it's also and it's often our real search. This is when people search for meaning. Yeah, like how do I inhabit my spiritual self? that's that search for the nature of me. This is where we get into, it is a bit of philosophical language, but do you get when you were looking at your apple, you were describing yourself in the world there, yeah, as much as you were describing the apple, yeah. When we talk about the apple symbolizes seed, which is actually my rebirth, you are describing your beingness at this stage and time, which may have been different at another stage of time, yeah. But it's our humanity, where we begin to form how I am in the world, and that will be based on your life world circumstances, yeah. So somebody, for example, who is in the West and who is exceedingly wealthy and entitled will have a very different sense of beingness than somebody who lives in poverty with little life opportunities. Yeah. Like my sense of being will just be different. So we can talk about the nature of my existence. I mean, in psychology, what we then do is describe, we can then begin to notice people who have a kind of a narcissistic personality will experience their being, well, of course it belongs to me. Yeah, that's their ontological knowing. Yeah, in some ways. Can you get that? It's so it's my feeling almost from the inside out. And we can do that. We experience our knowing in many different ways. Yeah, philosophers would talk about that in terms of space and time. So, like, space and time is about who I am now, my experience of me now will have been different to my experience of a 9-year-old as my 9-year-old self. In fact, we've already talked about that in terms of wisdom. Yeah. As an older person, my experience of myself, my life world will be different to maybe another time. And in some ways, as researchers, we have to understand that. We have to be able to apply people's life worlds to really understand it, to understand them. So this notion of, like, I don't know, do you know that cat food ad? Perhaps you don't, but there's a famous cat food ad in the UK, and I think it's probably in the States, that sort of says 9 out of 10 cat owners said that their cats preferred Whiskas cat food. Yeah.
Mine hates Whiskas.
Yeah. What it then had to change to, because clearly that wasn't true, was that, 9 out of 10 cat owners who expressed a preference said that their cats preferred it, meaning 9 out of 10 owners who said they really liked Whiskas, yeah, said that their cats preferred it. Yeah, can you see? Yeah. So we have to kind of really, really understand people's life world experiences. In other words, we have to get close, we have to listen closely to it. Yeah. We have to listen to the ontology of people. In other words, how they experience their being in the world, not as we think they are experiencing it. And of course, this is why, as counsellors, we are potentially brilliant at being qualitative researchers. Can you see why? Because part of what we do is we try to listen to people's stories. We're engaged in their ontological knowing. terms of how they experience being in the world right now. So we already have some great skills as researchers, yeah, because of our capacity to listen carefully and to really hear what is the essence of this person. So we are automatically potentially very good qualitative researchers. We are also really good qualitative researchers because we have the capacity, hopefully, to be reflective, yeah? To notice where I am with this material and how much impact I am potentially having on skewing this research. So I can then become aware of what's my ontological knowing in this, and what am I therefore not seeing in the other. Can you really get that? That's why we're potentially really good. So the good researcher needs to be a good self-researcher. In order to get to the essence of the experience that we're trying to research.
So Jan, when I was reading, I was looking at what I wrote when I was writing about the apple, and they read like client notes.
Right.
Right? And like what I noticed was a pattern of what I had written, and it was like what I saw, and then what I really saw, and then how I felt. Right, and there was so much there that came out, and it was a bit alarming because it's an apple, right? And it brought out so much in not just me, but in all of us. And then I thought, oh my God, if this was like a real live human being, then what must happen there?
Well, there's a good question. You know, like what happens when there is a real live human being? You know, I guess we can uncover all kinds of things that are important for us to uncover. Yeah, you know, maybe those areas where I don't want to look at it. I can't bear to be with this suffering. Maybe. Yeah. Or I can't bear to be with this difference of opinion. I don't like this person. I don't like what they're saying. I don't like who they are. They remind me of my mother, my father, my last husband, my last wife. Yeah. There's a lot here then, isn't there, in terms of what can get in the way. And that's even a really good research topic, isn't it? What gets in the way of me fully getting to know my clients.
Actually, I was just thinking what happened with the apple thing. It was my own happening, what was inside. I was like feeling like, looking what I am doing. The apple just felt like person for me. How I'm interacting with others around. So it was a very different experience from the start to the end. Because my inner self-reflection was there.
Well, in many ways, what we can notice there is this is almost a bit like the process notes we might write in therapy. You know, our reflections afterwards, or maybe the notes we take to supervision. This is how much the client is impacting on me. If we're to use therapeutic jargon, this is the land of transference and countertransference. This is what's in the room. And so on. And part of what we try to do is make sense of that. So each client encounter is a research opportunity. Well, it's research. What's going on here? And the other thing that we bring into our work, which is really important in terms of research, is another word that we use that some of you will know. And this is our epistemology. You'll see these words, you bantered around quite a bit. And this is different to just what I experience. This is what informs my experience. Yeah? And this is the study and nature of knowledge. Yeah? So as therapists, we bring in our epistemology to the therapeutic space if I'm a psychodynamic person, if I'm humanistic, if I'm transpersonal, if I'm a CBT person. Can you see how my framework informs what will potentially be going on or what I see in the room? My epistemological framework. Yeah. So when Michael comes and brings his diamond model, is that true? It's a model. Yeah. And it may be a model that we feel is really helpful to use. And if, rather like the Kalamas Sutra, if it makes sense, then we use it. Yeah. But can you see that's an epistemological model? Yeah. That, if you like, is the frame of knowledge that we use. And it may change throughout time, depending on a whole bunch of things. Our epistemological framework in therapy has changed hugely, during the last 20 years, certainly during the last 30 years since I've been practicing. Lots of ideas have come in. Actually, some of them haven't changed. In fact, what I'm finding interestingly is that my very first epistemological model, which was taught to me 30 years ago, 25 years ago, by two very special teachers of mine, I'm now finding, I'm going back to that, because actually what they taught, all this new neuroscientific malarkey, was already covered by them. They just had different words for it. Yeah. But can you see how, we can move along with our framework? Like Scotch tape.
Microsurgery,
Yeah.
organs, whatnot, Scotch tape.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you have to go through that cycle.
Right. This is really important in your journey as a therapist, isn't it? That we go from there to there to there to there to there. But what we're doing is our knowledge and our practice is informing our epistemology. Yeah. And you see, do you see that? You maybe began by, thinking back all those years ago, your ways of understanding people was like, wow, TA, that just makes complete sense of the world for me.
Yes.
Yeah, great, I'm a TA person. Yeah, wonderful. Fritz Perls. Gestalt, no, that's the way. That's the way. Yeah. Actually, we often begin with Rogers, don't we?
Yeah.
Wow, that is so brilliant. Great, life sorted. I've got my framework, and then TA comes in. No TA. Yeah. Gestalt. Oh no, we need psychodynamic knowledge. Yeah. Great, sorted. Yeah, I've got that. Oh no, the something about this transpersonal stuff that's a bit good here. Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, actually what we're noticing is we end up kind of forming an integration. Yeah. Then that becomes our own epistemological model. Yeah. And how do we find that? How do we get to it? It's like the Kalama Sutra, isn't it? We go out and we keep testing, we keep doing our research. Yeah. Can you really get that? This is really important in terms right now as independent practitioners. How we come to do the work that we do, it's based on ontological knowing, my own and others, yeah, how others experience their life world. And it's about the framework that we apply to it, yeah, which will change consistently. Yeah. What you come to realize, and maybe become a little bit more cynical, is you begin to notice, what was it that somebody said, here's a new little fad. Yeah, we know that trauma's the thing of the moment. Yeah. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but like, you know, or mindfulness is the thing of the moment. Yeah. What we're probably noticing now is attachment is all part of the thing of the moment. Yeah. So these things come in, and then they kind of like something else comes in, and then something else. Yeah. And these, if you like, are all about, back to those words, grades of significance. Yeah. That language we use, it's like it may have some significance and then it will fade, and something else comes in, and thus our framework gets developed. Yeah. So then we ask, if I ask, well, what is knowledge? That's the epistemological journey, to find the knowledge, yeah, that gives us some kind of truth for now. But is there a truth?
We keep on searching and finding out through our experience what the truth is for us.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel my truth has changed over a period of time.
And it will keep changing. So there is no absolute truth.
Well, I was recently sitting in a workshop, right, just last week, I think, yeah, on trauma. Just about 6 hours on me. But as I was sitting there and reflecting at the end of it, and it was even a workshop I'd done years and years earlier, right, by the same person also. My experience of it all was very, very different now.
Yeah, yeah.
And also then with all that we've done with Michael,
Mm-hmm.
again, right, I experienced it and I really had, I mean, and it's not that I have the answer, right? It was a real reflection of, okay, there is similarities, there's many differences. Again, like it was for me, what works for me?
Mm-hmm.
What is kind of, what can I hold on to that works for me with my clients? That's kind of what I came as a, you know, and as I said, I don't have it all figured out, but it was just interesting that thought struck me. Because in a lot of ways, yes, there were similarities, but also a lot of differences in the way of working. A lot of body-mind work came in there, and just like, and you know, see Michael do some work also, but it was just really like, you know, making me really curious and indeed reflecting on where I, you know, how I put all these into practice and work with all that. So when you talk about your own framework, that really resonates with me.
Perfect. I mean, that's exactly what this is about in some ways. You know, it is about finding our own ways of understanding. Yeah. And it's about that continual way in which we make use of knowledge. Yeah. in the way that can be of benefit to one and all. You know, but that bit, as you're saying, what is true? I mean, it's a wonderful question, isn't it? Like, maybe we come to see that all of these things are just opinions of the moment. Yeah. And that things shift and change. I often tell the story of many years ago, you know, following treatment for a cancer. I had to have a bone density scan. I can't remember whether I've told you this story. And actually, based on the research of that moment, I was told the evidence was that I needed to go on a particular drug that would help in terms of ensuring I didn't lose bone density. Yeah, it was a DEXA scan that I had, and that's so I had to go on this drug. I didn't have to. I chose to go on this drug that I didn't like very much. Yeah, in fact, it was a drug where you had to take it once a week, and you had to take it sitting upright, because if you know, when you swallowed it, you know, if you had reflux, it would really burn your throat. So it was not a very pleasant drug. And the following year, I had my DEXA scan, which was exactly the same as it was the previous year. But new research showed that if you're on that point on the osteopenic range, it meant you didn't have to go on the drug. Yeah? What was true? Yeah? What was true? Yeah, like there was evidence that suggested maybe, but it's true in that moment, or maybe it's an opinion in that moment. Yeah, it's when a truth becomes an opinion. Yeah, and actually maybe we come to realise that in the research. Yeah, it's just my opinion. But the difficulty arises, I guess, when we start to have our own agenda. And if my agenda says, this is how it is, yeah, this is the best way to work with trauma, this is the best way to work with a client, then I start to not have an opinion, but to, you know, that's when we'll all start battling with each other by saying CBT is rubbish, which of course is patently not true. Yeah, or that psychodynamic, that doesn't really. You need to work with, you know, with the body. Yeah, so psychodynamic is rubbish. Yeah, for the body workers, you know, it's like body work is great, but what about meaning making? What about logic, which is important? Yeah. So that.
As I'm thinking, like, if you think about research, and we talk about variables, right?
Mm-hmm.
How much more variables can you get than in a human being?
Right. Yeah.
Right? In a human being who sits in front of you, who is just so different than any other human being. So how can there even be truth? Right? Because there's absolutely no constant in that human being.
So let's hold on to that, because this becomes again really important in our research, which is like we could kind of think, well, then nothing matters.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
and this is the art of practice-based research, is that everything matters.
Yes, everything matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And that therefore this experience is important. Yeah. My experience with my client is worth sharing. Yeah. Because maybe there is a multiplicity of truths here. Yeah. So rather than it being hopeless, yeah, there is something that is quite hopeful. Yeah. that it all matters. I don't know, where are you with this? This is where we're really entering where our practice is a practice of philosophy as well.
When you talk about it all matters, it's fine if I've had a client who had major anxiety and, after a few sessions, the family was like, okay, I think she, that maybe she might need medication, but let me have time with her to understand. And then they were like, then I found out that they wanted to stop therapy. She stopped, and then they wanted her to go to a peer, religious person, and that religious person said, no doctors, no therapy, I'm going to do it all. So when you talked about it all matters, and what is the hidden agenda, it just struck me that I would be, okay, you want to go to different people, that's fine, that's, that gives you strength. But then somebody else is like, don't do any of that, that's like this. Instill mistrust in her, that I can just cure you, don't go to anyone else.
That's the reason religion gets the controversial. She's going to hear all those things.
Just like
The
you speak
final,
up.
the final decision has to be the client's. Because she will be exposed to all these people saying that this is the only one, or this is the only way. Then the client has to be at a position where he or she can decide for themselves. And I think the beginning of our work is to be able to make them think to a certain extent for themselves and to make them individuals who are independent of other influences. But the final decision has to come from them to get a bit of a lot on different experiences.
I guess it also raises questions, doesn't it, around well, how significant is counselling and psychotherapy? Are we being a little narcissistic if we think we've got the answer? I really, but we can get caught up, can't we, in thinking that you just need therapy. But that's still just a bit of an epistemological framework.
I mean, the pills work for some people. The people feel they are healed or whatever, So there is that thing.
There is nutrition, there is exercise, there is
Whatever a person believes
so
in.
many things.
I'm just presenting all of these things to bring in what I hope is kind of continuous reasonable doubt.
Well done,
Oh, you
you've done
did
it.
that. I was going to say, you did that.
Now that we've isolated now successfully, we're still exploring.
Yeah.
Well, like, oh.
As a starting place, as a starting place, to keep going is that so. I'm shaking things up a little bit.
This profession has always surprised me, or I would say astonished me at times, the power it has, because in the daytime I don't work as a therapist, I'm a lecturer in a law school. And my colleagues somehow, when they find out I do this in the evenings, start sharing stuff. And now I don't become their therapist, but I just sometimes give them that listening, maybe 15-20 minutes between lectures. And I don't feel it, but they come up and say, this has changed for me. So this profession is really valuable because of the listening skills it has given us as therapists. It's something that I've experienced in my family, as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter. Just not giving your opinion on everything, just listening. I remember you had a workshop on meiotic listening.
Yes, yeah.
And that word kept, stayed with me. And how my first experience of just listening was you didn't say anything, you just kept quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And you were waiting for everybody to say something, and within 10 minutes, people started engaging, talking, and you were just sitting there listening. That was a beautiful learning experience for me. Because I used to have an opinion on everything, and which made me, I'm sure, unbearable at times.
Yeah.
This profession is really, really amazing.
Well, I think I'm glad you kind of recalled that, because actually one of the important things in terms of the listening is, and again, it can be a real shake-up to what it is that we think we do. You know, because we may imagine that in listening, it is a skill that I have, that I do, yeah, and there is a level of truth in that we know that research aspects show that, like, there are some things that I remember doing this, you know, that say this can be helpful in listening, you know, if you stay, I think I use the example of Sola, do you remember Sola, which is where you sit square on to the person, yeah, you're open. You lean forward a little. You sit with an empathic presence. And you relax.
Terrible.
You look so
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, this is what research shows. But of course, like, it isn't just sort of like that, is it? I mean, it's actually how I embody that in some ways. That is it. Because, like, could you imagine what it's like? And actually, you do sometimes get people who are a bit sort of like arrange the seats just so before we begin our session. You know.
Reminds me of the best
And yeah, but there's something about how does that come alive, and actually there are philosophical ideas about listening, which is what I was referred to in there around the myetic means is the midwife, and of course the midwife actually, when it comes to delivering, doesn't do anything. Yeah? A woman will give birth unless if there's complications. But the art of midwifery is doing nothing but sitting in presence. Yeah? In fact, all my midwife friends just describe themselves as baby catchers. Yeah? You know, which is there, you know, you're just there to catch the baby. You just allow the process to happen. Yeah. But there are several philosophers who really help us to understand other ways of what it is to really listen, and that it isn't just a thing we do, but it's also a way of being. And somebody this is a complex philosopher called Levinas, who had the most beautiful way of describing the art of being there for the other, is that in order to really listen to the other, I have to allow myself to be impacted by the other. Yeah. And that indicates the quality that the person has been listened to. It isn't that. Yeah. It isn't even just about summarizing, paraphrasing, all of the so-called skills. They're helpful tools, yeah. But philosophically, it is about my beingness, if you like, being impacted on by the other, yeah. By allowing myself to feel the other. And I can do that in a number of ways, but ultimately it is about allowing my vulnerability to be there. Yeah.
Please repeat
Um,
that. About the vulnerability.
about allowing my vulnerability to be there. Yeah. And just allowing myself to be impacted. Yeah. And when that is kind of in a real deep felt way, then the other person, then I know I have been heard. Yeah. It's rather like, remember yesterday when I said, when I was deeply moved, when my client said to me, Jan, you just let me love you. Yeah. That is around being impacted by my client. Yeah. And not kind of going, no, it's fine. And yeah, in that moment, I can notice my defences coming up. Yeah. This is where me as practitioner really notices what's happening for me. All the subtle ways in which I can keep myself out. Yeah. All the myriad of ways in which I very quickly move into doing stuff. Because I need to quickly think of this in order to appear as if I don't know what the hell's going on. Yeah, that can be one of my responses. Rather than just receiving.
It's always the do's and don'ts that put you in a position where, all that kind of stuff. You to allow yourself to flow and not worry about it. But then when you bring it into supervision or clear, there will always be yes, it's right and no, it's wrong. So how does that come to allowing the work to go on in the moment?
Well, I think in relation to that, when we maybe, each of us may have different opinions on how to do things. Like yesterday when we were doing the peer supervision, there were several opinions that may come in. And what we do with that generally is we find a way of digesting it, making sense of it, in readiness, as we will begin to see, for the next time we do it. Yeah. Or utilise it in some way, if that's what you mean, Shasta, in terms of like.
Can I just say something like when it just hit me that, one of the things is like when clients give you a gift, or one of them's, I said, I don't accept. He went and dropped off flowers and a really nice card for me to, thanking me for, really being there on his journey and how he's, so much better in himself and so it came with so much love that I just, I wasn't going to say no, I'm not going to accept it, but we ingrained like don't accept things from clients. So I did because it was a beautiful note and there was beautiful flowers and I,
It's in the moment.
yeah.
And like what Avna said, judgment call. I think we are at a place now to take everything on board and then whatever works for us. And yes, our private supervisors, if there is something categorically wrong with our work, then they can point it out.
Like I
And
took
the thing that really comes to mind is the body work that I saw recently in my group. We are not supposed to touch our clients, and we are not supposed to, sort of be outside and acknowledge them. And in the body work, it was almost erotic to a point. So the confusion kind of comes in. From as a person who's going to be examined or evaluated,
Yeah.
where do I stand over
Yeah.
there and what is the thing to do and what not to do?
Yeah. Well, let's use that as a really important example of like, when you're kind of meet something that's a bit of an edge, you know. Because actually for me, the phrase that comes up at that moment is, and this can happen in our field, and I think you've probably heard me potentially use this word before, but that's a bit of an epistemic dichotomy. What that means is, it's where my old framework is met with this other framework, and it's a bit inconsistent. Yeah? I don't quite know what to do with it. But in that moment, that's where the work is, that's where the learning is, yeah? Can I use it, can I not use it, yeah? Some forms of frameworks would say you don't do that. Well, we could use our famous word, is that so? Yeah. You know, there are other frameworks like in body therapy, and when we do the Hakomi, we'll notice that there are things that we do where we do touch the person, yeah, in service to the work. Yeah, it's in service to the work. Yeah. But people will have different opinions on it. Who is right in all of that?
But it's not about the opinion, is it loud or is it not? Because you know, it's something that as a learner I need to know, because if I'm not allowed to touch and you only do that with your client and you kind of stay and then you're sitting there and your shirt is opening up and you're sort of getting into all kinds of positions and the client is kind of all over, it's okay. I mean, if it's part of the work, then that's alright, but which is the one that we're supposed to follow or not? So have the rules changed and so it's alright to go into touch and be together and all that? Or is it not?
Well, I think there are several threads to there, and maybe there isn't a perfect answer to it, but you know, I think it depends on your epistemological framework. Yeah, and there are some models that would say, because of the framework, that you don't touch. Yeah, because it would be inconsistent with that model. Yeah, but there are some models where that's not true. Yeah, so that I think all I'm saying, Shaista, is that there's something here around where does that fit in for you, and that's part of the work right now. Where does that fit in for you? Yeah.
So if it fits in, it's alright. I
think,
will not be told that no, don't do that.
well, you know, there are two sources that will say no to that. One will be your client who will say that's too much. So yeah, so therefore
That's
then,
not my point. My
Yeah.
point is from the evaluation side of it, because there's a lot of do's and don'ts in the rule book.
yeah,
So it's not that the client is
Yeah.
saying, oh, I might take in the
Yeah.
moment,
yeah,
but it's what is the
Yeah.
correctness
Yeah.
in the rules of
yeah, yeah.
our learning.
Well, again, it'll come back to what framework are you using. Like in terms of, you know, the rules, like go back to the Kalama Sutra here. You know, like don't believe it, you know, just because yada yada. This is a really good question, and actually we can keep opening this question in terms of the ethics of the work. You know, like there is no right or wrong here.
And
Yeah.
yet we are constantly,
Yeah.
this is right, this is
Yeah.
wrong, this is right.
Well, and for me, this is beautiful, because for me, as an independent practitioner, this is the hard bit. You become the person who has to develop that inner ethical framework. Yeah. It's not just an outside thing. It's not somebody saying you don't do X, Y, or Z. Yeah. This is where you as a practitioner begin to develop your own inner work. I think that there are some basic precepts, if you like, that we would work with, you know, like as, you know, from an ethical framework, you know, one of them would be that we work really hard to be mindful of not abusing our clients. And notice I'm saying don't abuse your clients, because there will be times when you do, unconsciously. Yeah? There will be times when you will become the parental figure who will abuse the client. Yeah? That will happen in the work. Your work then is about working with the rupture of that.